got my laces tied. My trusty podcast by my side. If you wanna talk fun, it's the place to be. Yeah, it's the Drop, D-R-O-P.
All right, today we are with Tatum Brandt, and Tatum, I became familiar with you on Instagram, started watching your posts. I love the kind of posts that you do, that Bima does, where you kind of break down stuff. And what's different about what you do is you really look at it from a marketing sort of almost agency perspective of a bigger picture of what's going on in the industry and why it's important. And I love it when you break down, like you did a thing on Bandit and pieces like that, where you're like kind of exposing the not so obvious side of it, but like, here's what you're seeing. This is what you like, but why do you like that? And why are the rest of the brands heading that direction? So without further ado, the Tatum Brandt, did I give a good overview of kind of like?
No. That's a perfect overview, and I'm both honored and intimidated to be included in the company of Bima Williams because, oh my God, what a guy.
Yeah. I mean, Bima's got his niche, though. Like, that's his collabs.
He's so good
and
at
creators. And yeah, what I love about that genre is it's so entertaining to see the thought process behind it. And I like kind of like, it's almost like when you hear a comedian tell a good joke and it switches the way your brain thinks.
Yes, exactly that. And what's interesting and fascinating when I started posting content around branded marketing, specifically within fitness and wellness, which is such a hyper niche, is what I'm personally fascinated by, but I don't assume anyone else is fascinated by it. But we're kind of seeing that like the average consumer likes to kind of dig deeper and get behind the little matrix and see like, oh, how are we being sold to? Because we're being sold to constantly. Why do we like things? And I think we're seeing more people start to ask those questions and then in turn be hypercritical of advertising and campaigns that come out, responses to advertising and brand campaigns by like the general consumer has been a lot more heated, I think, in the recent years than it has been in the past, which is so interesting to see the layperson break down what they did or didn't like about a logo redesign. It's fascinating.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me because I think that people are more savvy to advertising and marketing and realize that they're being sold, but we are also buying into it. We're like, it's okay. I'll be sold if you give me a good reason to be sold, or if I can buy into what you're trying to sell me. And then that's where I feel like the brand loyalty comes in. It's no longer like the magic of like you just like shiny things. It's, hey, I get to be part of this. So
It's post Mad Men era where, we used to pitch in the dark with, if you drive this car, you're going to feel like this and get the girl. We're smarter than that now. And now we like seeing behind the scenes and like seeing, I think, as humans, we like seeing excellent creative, great copy, great creative. And when we see that done well, we respond and say, here, take my money.
Yeah. I'm going to have to back you up because you already got me excited about talking about other things that are happening in the industry when you talk about great creative and great things, because I think it's getting harder and easier at the same time. But I want people to kind of know your background and why you're interested in this stuff and why you break this stuff down. Kind of give them, who are you?
Okay. So I started in the world of graphic design and advertising and brand. I've always been interested in art, so I pursued a degree in fine arts. We were talking about that before we hit record. And so I went to school for fine arts graphic design, and then I loved art for the sake of art, but there's an element of human problem solving that I think I really wanted. And so I took a few advertising courses and said, oh, this is it. So I switched over to advertising, and, went into kind of the user experience design rabbit hole. And from there, I was working for my university's Department of Recreation and Health. And so everyone I was surrounded by either worked for outdoor rec or they were personal trainers or exercise, science students. And so I was able to kind of churn out, hey, do you need a website? Do you need a logo for your personal training career, whatever that might be? So I started kind of slinging those out to expand my portfolio. And then this was in the glory days of like bodybuilding.com, when physique shows and competitions were everything in fitness. We were all drinking white monsters and meal prepping.
Nice.
And so I started doing some brand and website designs for that kind of crew. And it just started taking off. I had one client at the time who I think she paid maybe $500 for a logo and a website.
That's a good
And then
deal.
it's a great deal, let me tell you. She got picked up by bodybuilding.com in like a spokesmodel search they used to do years ago. And then I just started, the fitness and wellness industry is so interconnected, especially on Instagram. It was at the time and really still is. And so I started getting a ton of outside clients like after she went live, and just my personal interest and fascination is in the fitness and wellness industry. So I just went hard down that rabbit hole. And now I have a brand studio. So I have a small team where we work specifically with the fitness and wellness industry and foundational brand strategy and brand identity design. So that's my day job. And then I started posting content about this time last year, saying, hey, I kind of want an outlet to talk more about these things that I can't directly apply to client work. And it's cool to see that other people are interested in it and fascinated by it. And it's proven to give some great connections. We're here talking because of that. And so that's, as much as the internet can be the worst, it's great for things like this,
I was thinking about this morning. I'm like, I pay attention to things that I don't like, and then I get more of them in my feed. I'm like, I need to start just hitting that not interested button or whatever, because it really can become a trash heap. But you're providing some stuff that I never feel bad about after I watch. So that's good.
That's good. That's my goal, and I mean, I think it is important to pay attention, especially if you have to work in a zone where you kind of have to be chronically online. I think that's what got me interested in running. I love to trail run particularly. Nice. So that's kind of my escape, to unplug from the matrix and get outside.
That brings up something that I think is difficult. Like, you could go to a regular agency and you could be like, I have a running shoe and I want to do a campaign, and they could be like fantastic. They could be working with Coca-Cola or whatever and really be great. But if they can't speak the language of the people that actually participate in that sport, and you talked about bodybuilding, you talked about running a little bit here. We're getting into some of your ultra running. I'll let you give a little bit of background on that. But that's the thing I think is gone in marketing. You can't be a visitor in the space anymore.
Oh, that is so true. That is absolutely true. And I think you see that when campaigns flop. We recognize inauthenticity so quickly. And I think that's been the key to the little success that I've had within fitness and wellness working with clients is you've got to understand, even within a specific niche like nutrition, you got to understand that the different methodologies within nutrition. There are some people who are anti-diet. There are some people who are health at every size, track your macro. And what you can't do is just say, great, we're going to give you a logo with an apple in it and call it a day. You have to understand that nuance, even to kind of break out of the industry norms, but do it in a way that's going to be well received and seen as a creative success instead of you do not speak our language and you don't belong here.
Well, you can even see, like, when I see a photo of a runner, that I can I can look at them and go, that person doesn't run. Like, they're a fitness model. They look great.
Oh my goodness, especially in stock video. I think it's gotten so much better, but it used to be the worst. You see somebody's running form and you say, maybe you're nervous, but it looks like you haven't run a day in your life.
Yeah. But yeah. So you mentioned that you have done some ultras and done some stuff. What was your thought process in that? Because it sounds like you came from more of a bodybuilding, fitness side. And then I'm guessing that this happened even before I don't know how you even call it a boom. There's little bumps in running, but it sounds like you were doing this before the latest bump.
Yes. And we can talk about the history of running and some of those bumps. I think that could be an interesting rabbit hole. But yeah, I kind of started I will say I never competed in a like bodybuilding competition. a lot of my friends did. And that was both fun and horrifying to watch. I think there's good and bad things about that sport. And then I had a lot of friends in powerlifting. And so I was designing some, merch for powerlifting local competitions. But then personally, growing up in Kentucky and Tennessee, which are beautiful states if you've never been, the outdoor scene is just so vibrant there. And so I started getting into backpacking and hiking and discovered trail running as this like beautiful hybrid of hey, this is exactly what I want to be doing on a hike, actually. This is combining all the things that I love. And so I'm a very all or nothing person, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. So I ran my first half marathon in 2018 and said, oh, I really love this. And so I jumped immediately to 50K trail distance after like a road half marathon. And it was fantastic. I fell in love. I ran a race, the Georgia Jewel in North Georgia. And it was brutal and horrible. And I made horrible mistakes with nutrition and fueling. And then have done some very mediocre backyard ultras and races since that point.
I mean, you say something that makes sense though. Like your first ultra, you kind of learn by doing something like not eating properly or not fueling properly, and then it actually teaches you to figure it out.
You learn things the hard way. You have a couple DNFs maybe, or maybe you just have, which I haven't officially DNF'd a race, but I've had, with the exception of a backyard long distance one I did here recently. But you just learn horrible mistakes and have a miserable time and say, next time I'm not going to be this miserable. And you incrementally get better. Yeah. The first race, I think I fueled with primarily the vanilla goo flavor, and that's all I had. And it was about 90 degrees outside, and I wanted to, never eat one of those again after that.
That's the thing. And the other thing is like a lot of people like you came from the half, and then it's on the road, which is sort of controllable. And then each course is going to be different for an ultra. Yeah. And the other thing is like, you're like, this is the pace I run on the road. I should be able to do that out on the trails. And that's a beginner thing that people, I'm like, no, go out nice and easy. You got 50 miles. You'll be fine.
And so much can happen, especially if you run a race. I did a 50 miler in Crested Butte, Colorado, that was just absolutely like, you start out at, I think, about 10,000 or 11,000 feet. And, if you don't live at elevation, that's a rough way to start. You don't know how your body's going to respond.
Yeah. I mean, now you're living in Raleigh.
Yeah. And at the time, I was living in Savannah, Georgia, which was right at sea level.
And people say that humidity is a poor man's altitude training, but when you get up to altitude,
it's not the same. It doesn't translate at all. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just another way to make running hard. Awesome. So now let's get into it a little bit, because what I like on some of the things that you break down, and one of the ones that I saw recently was you were kind of going over the niche brands that are coming up and biting at the heels of some of the giants like Nike or Adidas or any of those. And this is a newer trend that's being made available by the fact that the world's getting smaller, and if you want to manufacture or design stuff, it's more accessible than it used to be in the past. But we're talking about trends, and when I came in, and we talked a little bit about this before we got on the podcast, when I started running, the Born to Run movement was this first new big movement, barefoot running and stuff. And it did some good things, but it did some bad things. And we see these trends in running up and down. What have you noticed in this latest trend that is like going to define it, do you think?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think you're absolutely right about the accessibility with starting businesses and being able to manufacture things. I think what we're seeing now, the reason some of these smaller running brands are taking over, it's not that one of them is coming out of the gate and stealing a ton of market share from the likes of like a Nike or an Adidas, but it's just death by a thousand cuts. There's the Bandits, there's the Satisfies, and they all are coming into the scene with like a hyper targeted like subculture strategy. So they're looking and they're saying, we are for this one particular person. And it's almost, I don't know if you follow the meme page. It's your boy Scott Jurek.
Oh yeah. He just shredded.
Oh, God, which we could talk about.
Wait, yeah, I think that when we talk about separate, because that's a whole branding thing.
That's a whole
in a
thing.
nutshell.
But they talked about like some of these brands are more in, they're creating almost art and gear for almost the idea of running more than the act of running itself, which, not to discredit any of these brands, because I'm in love with Bandit Running in particular. But all of a sudden running has become kind of a cool kid thing. And so you're seeing it become a status symbol. And especially post-pandemic, we've seen this swing towards putting our discretionary income towards our wellness. I think as we had to step away from our day-to-day 9 to 5, it kind of flipped the world upside down. And all of a sudden we're prioritizing our wellness and our fitness. And what happens in a capitalistic culture is that commerce goes behind that. And all of a sudden these become identity markers. So we're now saying, okay, I enjoy running. I enjoy getting outside. This might be a little bit more accessible than starting to power lift or getting into Olympic lifting. So that's an easy thing to adopt. And there can be some community behind it. We saw like a huge surge of run clubs. We can get outside and do something productive together. To start to fill the void in our lives when we're working from home and don't have community. And so I think we've seen commerce kind of come in on the heels of that resurgence with kind of the run club. The kids are into it. And then we're seeing people show up at these run clubs with hydration vests and like the latest and greatest Garmin or Suunto and, to run a 5K. And it's, because it's a status symbol more than anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with where we're putting our money versus where in the past it might have been watches, cars, and, designer clothing. Where now you could still say it's designer clothing in this place, but what the true mark, I think, is success. People are using their physical wellness, like how fit am I? How I've got the time to go run. I've got the time to lift. I've got the time to improve myself. And you can't purchase that. So that in itself is the non-negotiable. Like you can't buy it. Now nutrition companies are jumping into that to try to get into that. But then the next step is how do I show up and how do I tell people what's important to me, and that is the run clubs. And then on top of it, that is the social part that you talk about, the run clubs. Right now, I think you didn't have to, back in the day, and I'm not even talking that far, like 2009.
Yeah.
You left your house. Didn't matter if you had matching socks on. You didn't buy the shoe for the color. You whatever it was like the fit, whatever they told you. If they told you need stability, you threw on a pair of Brooks shorts, you threw on a t-shirt, and you went for a run, and you were hoping nobody saw you.
Yes.
The difference is now you go out on a run and you're hoping to be seen and hoping to go spend time with other people in a group and, look the part.
And some of that too, I think we can attribute to social media. Like that has absolutely, like all of a sudden, I think used to, it's not even, we hope that we're not seen when we go out for a run, but we're not even thinking about it. We're going out for this activity that has nothing to do with our aesthetic identity that we're trying to craft, because that wasn't a thing. Facebook and Instagram and those platforms in 2009 were very different. We were just sharing, photo albums of uncurated moments with our friends. And so now we're curating this aesthetic identity and saying, I am the type of person who can purchase Satisfy. And, I've got the Nike Alpha Flies and, this is the type of person that I am.
Yeah. Well, you brought up, and you were heading towards it when you brought up your boy Scott Jurek. There's a brand that I've always loved that I feel like has abandoned their core audience and abandoned their own brand a certain degree. And I think you know who I'm talking about.
We're talking about Tracksmith.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about Tracksmith. Poor Tracksmith. I posted to my story when they dropped their Overland collection and said, okay, how do we feel about this? Which I try to do for, anytime I see something interesting. And I always put up a poll that says hit or miss, and the large majority of that poll said miss. And then in my DMs were a mix of people who were in the industry who work on those types of campaigns and said, oh, I feel for the people at Tracksmith because they're getting ripped apart online and in their comment sections. I did read, I think you guys released kind of a review, and you said like the Overland collection is not trying to be loud or chase clout. It isn't trying to win UTMB or Western States, which I thought was a very delicate way to put like maybe trail runners who compete in those events are not going to be wearing this collection. I don't know. What do you think?
That's the thing. I think there could have been a way they positioned it that would have softened the blow, because here's what you have. You have the trail runners are already a mixed bag of people. And there's a lot of people who like trail running because it isn't the glamour side. It isn't infiltrated with expensive gear and stuff like that. You can put together, you go get your Columbia wicking shirt for $25 and you get, whatever, and you can kind of put together and throw it in the back of your van and, go for a trail run. And it was accessible for those people. And then seeing some of the brands like Satisfy come in, Speedland with $300 shoes, like all of a sudden there's these brands are going, oh, trail is something. Let's get our part in it. And the fact of the matter is, you're going to have that within any sport, but there's more gatekeeping, I think, in the trail running space than maybe in road running a little bit, which is hard to say.
It is hard to say, because what's so interesting, and I saw this in the comments of the Tracksmith post dropping this collection, is people said, I'm surprised to see these comments from trail runners because they are so welcoming. And if you've ever been to like maybe an ultra endurance event or a trail race, you could be running the 50K and you're getting high fives from the people who have been out running their 100-miler, and they say, good job. It is a very welcoming space, but it's also a very unpretentious, gritty space. And they've earned their stripes because they're out there putting in the hard work and not posting about it on social. So I think there's a reaction when you see a brand come in and it feels authentic and it doesn't feel like it's coming from the community, but trying to come into it in order to get something from it, like, commerce or like to profit. I think that group of people is very protective with their space. And we're seeing that with Tracksmith in particular. I think it's interesting because Tracksmith is so New England, and I typically love it when brands will launch something and it is so their brand. They're not trying to be for anyone else. It's, the creative is all behind, what they do. And so there's an element to the New England trail running community where if you're going out and you're running on gravel and like very smooth single track, then that gear might be perfect for that. But when you're a brand the size of Tracksmith and you're launching something like that, I think you have to look outside a hyper-specific pocket of people.
Here's where I'll debate you a little bit, but then I think we'll come to the same spot. But my feeling is that you take Tracksmith, and they were this romantic brand, and what they started off as was this like Ivy League polo for running.
Yes.
It was exclusive. It was. And there was some romance that you saw the old pictures of the guys wearing similar kits, that were breaking string tape, at the track on cedar tracks and leather shoes. And it was this callback to like this golden age of American track and what led eventually to the Boston Marathon being something. And it pissed a few people off, and it wasn't for everybody. But for the people who liked that and bought into that story and the romance of running, it hit home. Now, we move forward. We had some weird times during COVID. They tried to be more inclusive. The brand was kind of seen as Northeast stuff. But it kind of, by doing that, they dismantled some of what was special about them. And then you move it over into this trail thing. And I felt like you could have come out and said, you wear Tracksmith, you're a runner, you do this, you train, but every once in a while you're out on the trails and we're providing the Tracksmith. If you want to be Tracksmith on the roads and you're going to be in this area and you want to sometimes hit the trail, this is the kits for you. And, back it off of being like, here's our trail and we're authentic to trail and look at us in the Colorado Rockies.
I mean, you're spot on. I think that's exactly what it is. There's somebody that I follow on Substack. His name is Cole Townsend, but he posted, he said, my main critique of Tracksmith has nothing to do with the quality of the product that they released, but the copy. The copy that they put behind it. Like, let's say something different than, I think they had something about their hydration vest that was like something about, much like a squirrel stores food in his cheeks to keep sustenance available. What is this? Like, we could have had such a deep-rooted story, and you're absolutely right. Like, their roots came from this deep story and kind of world that they've built around Ivy League running in the Northeast.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you look at certain brands, and look, Polo did some streetwear and stuff like that, but that's when you saw Polo kind of fall off, was when they tried to like change what Polo was about. And you're seeing it come back right now. And Ralph Lauren, and it's coming back with the classic, preppy looks now. And it's like, okay, that's your brand. And why are you trying to pander? Like, own your brand.
They also had the opportunity, because to your point, the classic preppy heritage feel is coming back in vogue, but in a different way with a younger audience. And I think a great example of that, if we look at Wimbledon or the PGA Tour, like very classic heritage infused brands. Adidas had a collab with, I think it's Edison Chen, where they did something that was like tennis and heritage inspired. And it was the streetwear meets heritage. They had these beautiful art directed moments that felt almost weird in a way. And it absolutely worked for both the Gen Z audience and then the maybe millennials who are looking at that and saying, that is so cool, and I want to take part in that. And I think there is an element there where Tracksmith could have pulled at its like heritage roots and done something in a cool kid kind of way. Because the cool thing about trail running that I think Satisfy has tapped into a little bit is that kind of punk rock feeling and the grit that it has. And I think you can find that if you take an almost weirder or art directed approach, that I think there was room for Tracksmith to do that.
There, especially since there's a Satisfy already out there for the punk rock, like the dirt bag, wanting to look like a dirt bag runner when you really have
buying $300 shorts.
Roll up in the Mercedes van. But when you look at, I think we're kind of agreeing here on the Tracksmith side. Like, I look at brands like Orvis with fly fishing, or if you want, LL Bean's not quite elevated enough and that kind of stuff. But I felt like Tracksmith had the opportunity to go that direction, because I think they want to be seen as something different than they originally started off as, where I think you need to
go back to their roots.
Just drive that home. And I understand like some of their wanting to be poetic, because they start off, I believe Lee used to write all their copy, and she was amazing at kind of crafting these the romantic ideals of like steam coming off of fields when that kind of thing.
Yes.
Running that. And I think it's tough. I don't think she's there any longer, and so somebody's having to step in and kind of pick up that baton, if you will. But yeah, I would say you have an agency right now. What would be your advice? Like, if you saw this campaign, how would you recover?
I mean, I will say we work with a lot of like smaller brands and then startups at foundational stages. So I can't pretend to, I'm also 28, so I can't pretend to have the decades of experience that are required to successfully execute a campaign like this. But I do think from a brand strategy angle, if you're looking at what other brands are already doing or what's already happening within the space, you're going to be too late and it's going to be a miss. So especially if you're looking to say, okay, I'm Tracksmith and I'm trying to get into something that feels same but different, like a trail running. Look more at culture and society and where things are going and say, how does my brand in particular connect with the overall trends in culture? And you can look outside, like they could have looked at the resurgence of like Burberry with some of their campaigns and said, that's us. There's a version of that we could do. And they could have tapped into that. And I think that's what I would have done. And I think that's the success of companies like a Bandit is because they are looking outside of their own industry in the worlds of fashion and sport and not looking, across the aisle at what other brands are doing. Because that's when you get this kind of repetitive, we see all the same kind of creative. And that is also when it can feel inauthentic. And that's where when we're building brand strategies for new companies, we're saying, hey, we're going to lay the foundation of what is your personality at a very kind of high level and foundational feel so that when you go launch a new campaign or try to enter a new market, you can go back to kind of your core values and your traits and the who we are as a company and say, this is a world that feels adjacent to ours, and we can step into that and expand ours in a way that feels authentic to the core of our brand. And I think that's what I would have done if I was Tracksmith. Of course, outsiders, it's easier to evaluate a brand from the outside and say, I would have done this, but
hindsight's 2020, as I always say.
Yeah.
But seeing it, but it did seem. I mean, the public reaction to it shows that it was maybe a bit of a miss. Now, the good thing is, that for the most part, everybody's talking about Tracksmith right now. So
Exactly.
They're getting that residual buzz that people maybe who wouldn't have looked at the shoes or looked at the collection or at least taking a look at it.
And it is difficult. I think time will tell in the numbers. There may be a reaction from some louder parts of the community because we're also existing in a time. It's kind of hard to predict how people will respond to launches because it is such a high friction kind of time in society and culture that we exist in. And so things can be misread or miscued, and then one comment can kind of throw things sideways. And now that's the way that we see something. And so,
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what the numbers are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like if the shoe sells, we shall, we can get back to what else we were doing. But yeah. All right. So that's one. I think we pretty much covered that Tracksmith thing. But we were talking about different trends and loops. And what do you think is the next step, though? Because we're saying to look outside of the industry. Where in the future do you think we go? Because we do have like a Bandit that's the fashion side, and they cater to that New York, kind of like vibe. And then, Satisfy has, even it's getting big enough now that people are kind of like, you're wearing Satisfy. And, they've got their own haters. There's different brands that are now kind of like all these little brands are getting to a point where they get to almost a ceiling where they're not cool anymore because they're not as niche. But
exactly. And you see, as soon as Satisfy or Bandit or whatever player does something interesting, now to your point of manufacturing being a little bit more accessible, you see a bunch of smaller brands kind of jump in and copy and paste the styles onto their own because they see that it works. And then the market becomes oversaturated with this look that used to be super unique, but now we're seeing it everywhere because there are a lot of copycats, which is where it's important if you're a brand like that to keep iterating, and why you can't build your brand based on a particular aesthetic or trend because it's going to get ripped and it's going to get tired really quickly. I do think what is interesting, what I've been looking at in the world of kind of health and fitness more broadly, which I think we'll see carry into running, is there's this there is this surge of data with the Whoop and the Aura and the Strava. We're tracking all of our steps. We're getting data points on everything, to the point where used to only elite athletes had access to this level of data, and now the gen pop person has access to it. And every single software is now saying, hey, pay for Strava Premium and you can get the AI feature that analyzes your runs. And so we're tacking AI onto a bunch of software. And I've seen kind of on the sides, there's a group of people within fitness and wellness that are starting to become really tired and disembodied. We have so much data. We have so much tied. We're in our heads about our performance when we're not elite athletes. That there's this kind of movement that you're seeing on the fringes that's like a return to body. There's a brand strategist, her name's Jasmine Bina, and she has an excellent article that talks about the return to body, in that we're moving away from the data and into intuition. So when you look at platforms like an open, like meditation and breath work, it's all about, here is data, but like we're validating the emotion that you're experiencing. And so people are saying, hey, I'm going to stop. I'm going to start intuitively exercising, intuitively eating. I'm going to take off my Whoop, take off my Aura, because all of these stats around my own body are making me feel very disembodied and I'm in my head. So I think the brands that are going to win, it's not rejecting the data and rejecting the science, but it's saying, how can we validate emotion first and say, hey, you're experiencing this and you're feeling this. That is validated by this data. Here's how you can live in your body and use data to your advantage. And I think we might start seeing that enter the running scene, in that now the person who shows up to your local run club with, the hydration vest and the watch, and there's an element of that is kind of starting to be seen as cringy. And so I think we'll see more of like, we're leaving our watch and our headphones at home and we're getting out in nature and just going for a run. And I think we'll kind of start to see that pick up of experiencing nature, experiencing your body, and in it for the sport itself, no data. Which will be interesting, seeing how that will play with
for people.
Performance. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about that to me is, so we obviously we talk to the running shoe companies and stuff like that, and there's a great difference. It's getting smaller, where women weren't buying like the super shoes for race day because there was a self-consciousness almost about like, am I fast enough to warrant these or to be there? And it's slowly, we're wiping that away and saying, okay, look, these will work. They'll make your run better and you deserve it, kind of thing. But the same thing though, I think is happening with some of these niche brands. Like if you're somebody who's running 9-minute miles, 10-minute miles more, do you want to show up in a Bandit shirt or do you want to show up in, Satisfy because you feel like an imposter, or you feel like they're marketing towards this aesthetic? Like if you're, say you're not exactly, what a traditional, like in our minds, a runner's body looks like. Are you going to be able to wear a Bandit or Satisfy or any of the other ones that we're talking about here? In there, I see this big opportunity, like you're saying, with this emotional and feeling, is how do we gently bring people into the sport who don't want to look like they are a model off of a runway. They want to come in and just feel comfortable in their own skin.
Yes, absolutely. And that's been a consistent comment that I will get anytime I talk about on social media a Bandit or a Satisfy. There's a lot of comments about, oh no, this is elitism again entering the running space. I don't feel seen. Where's the diversity? Where's the inclusion? Which is absolutely a valid conversation to have. And what I think, we're not going to be seeing like a Satisfy Running answering that call. We're not going to be seeing Tracksmith answering that call. I'm hoping we'll see the next wave of running brands answering that call and saying, hey, we're here for people to just get outside and go for a run.
But getting back to brand, that's I don't want to see those brands go for that.
No.
I do want to see that, somebody else can make it cool. Our buddy Herm, he makes it acceptable for people to be, not have 6-pack abs and running with their shirt off. It's one of his missions, and I think the reason why he resonates with so many people is there's so many runners out there that are self-conscious or, maybe a little nervous to, show up for that run or whatever. And if there's a brand that seems cool, but still lets you in and makes you feel like you're part of things, like I think that could be huge. But I don't know if
agree.
everybody's got it.
And that's also, the hyper swing that we've seen with like Ozempic and GLP-1s kind of entering the stream of the cultural zeitgeist. And all of a sudden we're seeing elitism and thinness start to take center stage with a lot of these brands that are status symbol brands. And I'm hoping that there will be a swing back to, okay, let's prioritize inclusion and everybody and getting all people outside. We lightly, I think, experienced that like a little bit pre and mid pandemic, and then it just quickly swung back. And I would love to see some brands take a crack at that entering the space.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it always, that's again like I said earlier, like a comedian tells a joke, and when you get the twist on it, and it makes you think differently from there on out. Like, okay, I get it. I wasn't thinking that way. That kind of, I'm looking for the brand to do that for me now. Like,
yes,
okay, somebody come in with a new idea that I would blow me out from the side. And I have to say, I love the way that Satisfied launched their new trail shoe.
I do too.
Like when nobody was running, nobody was doing anything. It was. I don't think it was Bryce driving, but it could have been. In the desert in this dune buggy that inspired, like he does RC car, the inspiration for the shoe, and you're like, oh, I love that. Emotionally, I love that.
And that's where a brand like Satisfy, they rely on art direction. And, they had that side by side of the Velvet Underground and their shoe. Like that's where we kind of love that as almost, it mimics a designer or a luxury brand in that they say, here's the concept and here's what we've done with it. You're already running. We don't have to tell you this shoe is made for running. It can have all the specs and perform really well. We're actually going to market something else entirely, which I think is interesting in the space. That's what's so refreshing. Anytime somebody enters and does something a bit different. And for their audience, that's what they want to see. They're aesthetically driven. They care about performance, but they're going to figure out if the shoe is going to work for them. They also want it to look cool.
Yeah, if it looks cool, the next thing is, does it function well? And I really think, especially with that design, I don't think a lot of other people could have put out that shoe the way it looks. I think that they're able to say, this is how it looks and this is cool. And you go, yes, it is.
Exactly. That's when you've really got something as a brand, if you are the taste maker instead of trying to follow taste. And again, you got to look outside your own industry in order to do that. You can't take a look at what people are already doing and say, we're going to make that because it's already cool. Because at that point, it's not cool anymore. It's already been done.
Yeah. So we obviously have a lot of people who listen to the podcast that are in the industry or something like that. Give me some ideas of places to look where we could get out of the cycle of creating the same things over and over for running. Like where are sources, where would be I guess it would almost be like our pin board or our idea board. Where would you look outside of running to bring something interesting to a campaign?
I think one of the ways that I find inspiration, which sounds so cliche and cheesy, but it's often out on a run, I'll be mentally processing the thing. So stepping away from the computer, away from the Pinterest board or the Cosmos board, and stepping into nature and experiencing. I think our own human experiences can tell us a lot about the next creative thing, and creative thinkers can kind of draw those lines between an experience that they have personally or something that they see out in the world that might be completely irrelevant to the thing that they're creating, and then back to the thing that they're creating. And I think when you draw inspiration from human experience, that's when you're going to find something that really truly resonates with people, because we're all humans, we share experiences, and so that's going to be resonant. I think that the other thing where to pull inspiration is just, what are other industries that are innovating and creating interesting things that are completely outside of even sport? I think we saw, like, with Satisfy's shoe, with Bandit's Grand Prix race, like, we're looking at F1, we're looking at racing that's really interesting, and I think you can create maybe a short campaign that really works there. But if you look at the fashion industry or outdoor and recreation, and seeing what are people doing that's interesting, I think unfortunately we're seeing a lot of brands look at what new artists and creators are doing and kind of ripping it and then launching it as their own thing. That's been happening for years, but now I think it's a lot easier to draw the line between, here's this creator and then here's this thing that maybe Under Armour launched that is exactly the same. And so I think to look at artists that are actively creating beautiful things and then pull them into the conversation and say, hey, you know something and are doing something interesting that we're not doing. Do you want to come alongside of us and create with us? I think that's also that's going to be even more resonant with an audience when they see, oh, you partnered with someone like me and are creating something interesting and beautiful.
Awesome. So if I guess if you wanted to find out more information about you, obviously there's the Instagram feed. So give it to me, because I know there's an underscore in there, and I always put it in the wrong spot.
There's actually not. So my Instagram is at
Okay,
Tatum Brandt. That's Brandt. And unfortunately, I'm cooler on Instagram. I post more, engage more on Instagram. I try to stay active on TikTok. I do have a Substack that I will start writing on here pretty soon, but I do not keep up with well. And then my brand studio is Brandt, Brandt, creative.co. And so you can interact with our stuff on Instagram, on, find our website, which is the exact same URL, or on LinkedIn, which is the dreaded place where internet goes to die.
Yeah. I've given up on LinkedIn. Like, every once in a while I'll get like that request to connect. And if it's somebody that, like, I really know and I don't want them to feel bad that I rejected their thing, I'll actually log into LinkedIn just to be like, okay, you got it. But other than that, I've thought about just destroying that several times, but it's tough.
It is tough. I keep it active just to have a presence there. I'm hoping there's some founders who post content on LinkedIn consistently that is authentic and incredible, but they are few and far between. So
yeah, when I go on there, it usually just seems like sales pitches, but.
And AI generated posts, and then AI generated comments back to those posts. So.
Well, that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Was, with creatives and the ability to create now being kind of opened up by AI and making it easier. How do you what do you think of as the future, and is it scary to you what's going on with AI, or do you just feel like that's going to be something that's going to be a tool in your belt?
I mean, it's kind of a both and conversation. What's interesting about AI, you always see these scares when there's something new in an industry and the industry reacts. AI is just so groundbreaking is the wrong word, but you are going to see it fundamentally change so many industries, and it already has. I think within the design community, there's really two camps. There's the camp that is so anti-AI, we're not using it at all. There's, of course, the environmental impact associated with that AI does have, that is not great. And then, there's the camp of people that are like, get on the train or get left behind. We're creating art directed, photography and content and design, leveraging AI, and we're all in. And I think I don't fall into either camp. I'm currently kind of sussing it out to see, what is my relationship with AI? How can I use it to create better, but not to do the creation for me? That's the line I'm trying to ride. And I labeled it, AI hygiene. I'm kind of trying to develop, how can I use this in a way that doesn't hinder my own creativity? And I'm still finding it. I'll be honest, but I do think what we've already seen change, because when I started designing after college, that's when Canva really hit the scene. And so, I personally I used to get hired for creating a business card for $100 or $50. And now you don't have to do that because you have Canva templates. And so the bar just raised for how good you had to be at design in order to get hired. I think we're seeing that bar raising astronomically. And what's going to be prioritized is now like thinking and human ideas more than pixel pushing. So if you're a pixel pusher, I think you're going to get left behind. So start working that creative muscle and have the why behind anything you're creating.
And you said earlier, not the why. What was it? That problem solving. That I think that is something that's undervalued in the creative process. That people can make pretty stuff. You can prompt something and create pretty much the scene that you want, even photography that you want. But it's coming up with how does this fix the problem that we're looking at? And or problem might not be the right word. The solution for whatever we're trying to accomplish. Having the intelligence to do that, I think, is still, at least for now, something that people need.
I agree. And this may be an outdated way of thinking in the age of AI, but I always think is the reason we resonate with art and music so much as humans is because it's created by a human, and maybe subconsciously we're thinking about someone made this, and it's resonant because it came from a human. And so I think that there's still so much beauty in that when I see these excellent creative coming from AI, it's a little bit of a letdown when you find out that it is AI, or it is, at least for me. I think what's beautiful about art is that it is innately human. So I think there will always be a place for that in some capacity. And I hope I am not wrong in that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that Satisfy piece that we're talking about, and he's zooming across the sands and we see it in the car. If we knew that was AI, it would take something. There's something about the journey of getting there, intentionally putting something there and, creating that. I think that at least maybe I'm, romantic, but that's will always be something. And I honestly think that man-made, handmade pieces are going to become very valuable at some point.
I agree. I think you also see that within content and campaigns that are already being created. Like you see a lot of luxury houses hiring artists to create really intricate hand-done things. And in the comments, you'll see, oh, it's AI. And people say, no, this is a human created this. And it's so interesting. Unfortunately, I think we'll see handmade become kind of a luxury. And so most brands will participate in like the meta ad AI. And we're creating, things that will sell, and then art will just become art again. Maybe we'll have that swing back.
I like that. All right. So before we get going, what would be like an ideal client? Since you have, obviously you're putting this Instagram content out there to kind of flex your intellectual prowess with coming up with solutions for branding, or at least tracking what's going on with branding. And it's going to want it to funnel back to your agency there. What would be like an ideal client?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think an ideal client is a brand that is actively scaling and in a place where they need to repivot or reposition. That's where when we can come in and work on a rebrand, I get to nerd out and say, all right, let's really evaluate what's currently working, where are your roots, and let's really define where you're going next. So brands in a place to rebrand. And then we work with a lot of self-funded companies, founder-led companies that are smaller but actively scaling and trying to build something really impactful within the fitness and wellness industry. So there's a skincare line for combat sport athletes that we recently worked on. There's a software and like a a SaaS platform essentially for race directors who are trying to coordinate community around races and hotel bookings. That's super interesting. So anything in and around the wellness and fitness industry, typically that has an element of impact associated with it, are our bread and butter.
All right, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. It's always like I could talk about this stuff forever because like it's the fascinating pieces that, to me, you get a shoe, and if there was no branding on it, no anything, and the shoe feels good, you're like, oh, that's great. But that emotional layer that the brand puts on top of it, and the why and the whole thing, and the same thing with the apparel in the industry right now. That's the stuff that gets me excited. I love the culture behind it. I love the kind of being able to have a secret communication with other people that are running by how you decide to dress or how you decide what shoe you're deciding to wear. It's, I guess, code signaling to other runners. This is what I think is important. So
it is. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I think there's so much that is shared between sport and art and design and life. And so it's so much fun when I get to have conversations with people who feel the same.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Give a good stretch, got my laces tied. My trusty podcast by my side. If you wanna tuck run, it's the place to be. Yeah,